Welcome back to our Learning and Teaching podcast. In this series, we're going to be looking at another one of our Greenford High Five, practice. This week, we're looking at how to make the most of the do now. And we're joined by Ellie Williams. Hi, Ellie.
Hello.
Let's dive straight in. What do you think are the key things that make a do now impactful?
Okay, so the key things that make a do now impactful are that you need to be able to start the learning immediately, obviously. It needs to activate prior knowledge that genuinely is going to support in the lesson. So in an ideal world, this might look like a quiz on some revision that you've set for homework. And then clearly this kills two birds with one stone because you're checking for the homework and you're recalling the prior knowledge. It also is really important that you're using the do now to create a calm, focused routine at the start of the lesson. This does involve training students in the routine, but then they and you know what to expect at the start of the lesson. Personally, I like to avoid printed sheets because this creates a workload, and it also creates a behaviour trigger because students lose the sheet and they need to stick it in. At the start of the lesson, the students need to know they have one job, which is to do the do now, which enables you as a teacher to do everything else: troubleshoot equipment, take the register, settle any latecomers. It's really important that the students are able to do the do now independently so that everyone can access it. Make it low stakes, which takes the pressure off the students, and kind of, as I've alluded to, using minimal equipment, whether this is a mini whiteboard task or a book and pen task. If students can engage independently, then there's a sense of success early in the lesson. And then finally, for us, it needs to give us key information about what the students can or can't do, or what they do or don't know. The answers to the do now should be what they already know, not really what they can do. A specific, definite answer is the key to a do now, I think, because then this limits time needed for feedback. The answer is either right, which shows you they know the content, or it's wrong, which means you need to recap it, or they need to be more specific in the answer they're giving.
Yeah, I think that you've created a really considered approach there, and I think those principles work well for all subjects, so it's really nice. Do you think a do now always needs to be rooted in retrieval practice, or are there other forms that you think it can successfully take?
Personally, I think retrieval practice is the best use of a do now. I think if you allow for creative thinking in a do now, everyone wants to give their answer, and then your 10-minute starter task becomes a half-hour feedback session where everyone wants to say what they think. In English, for example, do nows like name a character who, or in science, give an example of an element, or in history, name a cause of X war. These are too vague. Personally, when I'm writing do now questions, I like to think of TV quiz shows like University Challenge because or like learning apps like Duolingo, because they only accept one answer, and then that means you can give immediate and accurate feedback. There's no messing about. If you want to be a little bit more creative with it, you could give a challenge task for people who finish quickly. But the start of the lesson is not the time for creativity, really, because then that can, like I've mentioned, kind of end up in open-ended chaos. But short bursts of creative thinking, if they are structured, time limited, if they are anchored in prior knowledge, can be useful. So like improve this sentence or reframe this statement from a different perspective.
I think I maybe agree and disagree with you. So I agree that retrieval is likely the most impactful model for long-term learning, but I also think that the purpose of a do now can be more fluid. So, for example, some people use it purely as a settling task, in which case the active ingredients of that are simply that it's accessible for all and ideally supports students to achieve success in those 5 minutes so that we're setting a positive tone for the classroom. So I guess as long as we're clear about like why we've chosen a particular format for our lesson, it can still be purposeful. Do you think the do now needs to look the same each time in order to build a habit? Or do you think that practice can benefit from a bit of variety?
I think, sort of like I've mentioned, looking at things like University Challenge and Duolingo, or I don't know, Richard Osman's House of Games, there are different sort of formula that work that result in you being able to give one definite specific answer, which I think needs to be the outcome of the do now, because like you say, it can become this unwieldy beast that goes on into the lesson. If you are giving them questions that have got one definite specific answer, then either they've got that prerequisite or prior knowledge or they don't, and it's just a yes or no answer. That feedback is immediate and it doesn't spiral into a long discussion. But also as the teacher, you get the information that you need to know in terms of, are they able to access the learning that you're putting in front of them, or is that something you need to recap?
Yeah, no, of course. I think there's definitely a benefit to having a consistent format because it's going to strip away any extraneous cognitive load. So when students know exactly what's expected from the moment they sit down, they can focus entirely on the content.
Yeah.
And the benefits of that are probably seen most with our SEND students or our reluctant learners, as they're the ones that are really going to thrive on that predictability. Ellie, thank you for sharing those insights. If you can give staff one takeaway from today, what would it be?
I think it's what you just said. Find a formula that works and then stick to it. A do now shouldn't take more than about 15 minutes at the absolute most, and students do appreciate the consistency. Like you said, the SEN students, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think we all can benefit from a bit of consistency.
That's a really perfect note to end on. It's been really lovely to speak to you today. Thank you for such an insightful conversation.
Thank you.